Welcome all. This is our weekly 4D class. Larissa unfortunately has a conflict. And Darinka, you not here the next 2 weeks. Maybe we'll waive off until you get back. I think we can certainly we'll talk. But what do you think, Nat?
We can see what Larissa thinks and Nico,
Yeah,
and
okay.
yeah, we can
I
we can
think
make a decision.
she'll agree. She's very uh group. Sorry to say groupie, but that's not the right word.
Group oriented.
That's
Um,
group oriented.
I did have a question
Yes,
before we jump back into the
sure.
material. So one of the things that's I've been kind of trying to work through is coloring people, coloring others, and one of the ways that I kind of found my own way to my color, and I've had some success with a couple of friends, is trying to figure out kind of their primary, meaning for me, it's intuition. So I live at the top of the
Yep.
chart, blue green. So I was able to narrow it down um, pretty with a high level of certainty to that. And I have one of my friends who I was very tricky to color because he is a multi-dimensional person. And it turns out he lives in the yellow quadrant, which is opposite of me. Um, which is typically hard for me to access, but I actually figured out that he and I connect both in orange and in green. Um, and how I kind of got to his coloring was identifying that he is a sensing first because he does present so strongly in orange. And he did confirm that after he kind of took the test. So my question after that long prelude, is there a way to identify people's kind of primary mode? Is it always the intuitive sensing, or are there people who are
Oh.
primarily logical?
I think I had an example in the workshop slides of this. Which I
Okay, I
mind
couldn't
you.
remember.
Yeah, so the Myers-Briggs thing, which I don't think much of in many ways, but with them they have this P and J. And the reason that I don't like what they do is that they're not doing what Jung originally, in my opinion, they're not doing what Jung originally intended, which is to find your innate personality. What they were trying to do is a very noble task of placing women in the World War II workforce, because women had never been in the workforce to that extent before. And they expanded this thing to 16 things, which I think is too much. But the one that is most variable and changes most often in retesting, because what they're trying to find out is where you're functioning at that moment to put you in a job, is the P and Y, and it gets it completely wrong for me with their test. What that is about is the P means it's about your perceiving axis, which means either you're going to be strongest in how you perceive with intuition or with sensing. So some fraction of the population, I've forgotten which, that's their strong axis, and that would mean one of those two is dominant. The other mode is the how you decide the judging mode, they call it the J mode, the judging mode, and that would be either deciding emotionally and logically. In the workshop slides, I break out the percentages of those, and I think something like, based on my recollection, I think the people who preferred the sensing is 70%. The people who prefer intuiting is like 30%. The people who do emotional deciding, they make it slightly larger, but I think that they're misperceiving. The big trick here is ferreting out what's innate and what's learned. And they're working with women, and women are, I think, are learn to be more emotional. I'm not think it's innate, but actually, if you included anger as an emotion, men are probably more emotional, which we don't tend to do for whatever reason, misogamy. So that's a long answer to a question that says, yeah, what we want to do, and the way I approach this is want to find out which is both, what the methodology is which is your preferred deciding mode, which is your preferred information mode. Combine those two, and that's what defines your core color. So, but to take it into a step farther, it's kind of a more advanced thing beyond the basic thing to say of the four, which dominates, and that's what you're talking about. So for me, I'm overwhelmingly an intuitor. And so how that shows up for me is that the work is a very comfortable fit to me because I use the blue to develop the intellectual material, and then I enjoy delivering it in the green. So, and I've always known that I am an overdone intuitor. It's been both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in that I can appreciate. I'm really bogged down in understanding the implications of entropy, but it's completely an intuitive activity. By the way, the thing that provoked this, just for fun, is I was looking at a YouTube video and he was asking what we get from the sun. And most people say energy, and that's not the correct answer because we actually are in energy balance with the sun. Right now, our energy balance is tipping slightly because of carbon dioxide to make more heat. But over time, the Earth is in energy equilibrium with the sun. What the sun gives us is very low entropy energy. That means it's highly ordered. It's a black body spectrum of light that provides very low entropy sufficiently that it can, for example, promote photosynthesis in plants. So the natural process is to take low entropy things and disorder them. So anyway, so
Did you send that out, that video? I feel like I've seen that video recently.
yeah, I actually looked at three or four, but that's the one that started me down this path.
Okay.
And I've
Okay.
been I've always known entropy as a mathematical concept because it's part of physics, but I never really thought about it sort of tore my mind open to think that what we get from the sun is not really, it's important, it's not energy, it's very low entropy energy. Without that, you wouldn't have life. If it just provided energy, like say the same kind of energy we re-radiate, you wouldn't have photosynthesis, you wouldn't have life on Earth, you wouldn't have us. So yeah, anyway, sure, I'll send that out, but that's an inquiry, and states tend to go constantly towards higher energy. And so it's an interesting idea. For example, how does a refrigerator make things cold? That's a low entropy thing. But what it does is it takes very low entropy energy, which is electricity. And that's why it's a waste. I can't stand the idea of heating with electric resistance heating. You're taking a very valuable low entropy resource and sending it into something that disperses into something very high entropy, just heat that is stupid. But refrigerator takes this very low entropy input and it converts it into cold, and then it emits hot air into the kitchen, which is high entropy. So that's a system that's going from low entropy to high entropy, everything does. How do we exist as organized humans? The food we eat, which is very specialized, is very low entropy. We eat the food and we convert it into heat, 75 watts of heat we radiate as a human. And we take it internally and continue into low entropy things like making cells and repairing things like that. So anyway, that inquiry is something only an intuitor would relish doing, I think. There's no numbers in this, there's no specificity, it's all
Right.
concept. So that's what
Yeah.
the
Okay.
fact that you asked me for that video speaks volumes about who you are.
Yes.
Darenka did not ask, see? So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, it does sound, it does sound really interesting when you hear that it's such a simple question. What do we get from sun? So
yeah,
I'd be very interested in
I'm playing with you, Darenka.
learning about it.
Yeah, it blew my mind open to think, because I would have answered energy. and it's not energy, it's low entropy energy. Without that, we don't exist. How does the sun make it? Well, it takes low energy things from the universe, namely isotopes of uranium and hydrogen, which are very low entropy things. They're very finite entities, and it burns them, creating higher entropy, but still low entropy black body radiation. That's 6,000 degrees Kelvin. And without that low entropy energy, life wouldn't exist here. Anyway, sorry for that diversion, but did that clear things up for you, Nat?
It did actually, and it helped me understand why the judging and perceiving, why that exists in Myers-Briggs. So actually just one other question, Darinka, do you have a primary mode of the four?
For me, I am in you mean in 4D? Yeah, in 4D orange, but then also I do have a little bit of yellow and a little bit of blue. So for me, green is nowhere on the map. And that's something, and that's something that I always have to be so careful about.
So
Right.
what's your occupation?
Oh, me, I'm an accountant.
See,
I
There
work
you
in
are.
finance. Yeah, I work in finance, so things are like an army in finance.
Perfect match.
So do you think you're more logical or sensor?
Mm.
Like, so I guess the way I think about it is I move more easily to green than I do to orange, which is why I came out as a kind of intuitor first. Versus I think if I was more logical, I'd be able to drop into orange really easily.
Exactly.
Yeah, for me, I easily go into blue.
Okay, so you're
My head
logical.
is always two steps ahead, just thinking, oh, how will this look like? How can we do it? Just like kind of detaching from what is reality now and then, okay, connecting with that. But I mean,
So
at the
Dorinka,
same,
do you understand how that informs that your strongest function is probably logical deciding, according to the diagram? Do you get that?
you can tell us more about it. It's always nice to hear from you.
Yeah, let me see if I can find some slides about this.
Yeah, this is something that I've started to lean on to color other people, is trying to figure out where I connect with them and trying to see where they move first. But to do it, I have to have pretty good knowledge of the person and history.
Yep.
I want to take us back to our slides, our movies. And you remember that it was very easy to characterize the 1D blue people. Remember that? The first thing I showed you was this billionaire, and you could see immediately he was 1D blue. It showed up in everything about him. And then we looked at the orange with the coach, and he was clearly controlling, going to win through this whole business of certainty of process. And he was easier, and got to Gandhi, who's pretty 4D. So in terms of what we're talking about here, I think this thing about that actually came up with Gerald. So, oh, it's in the wrong screen. Hang on, I gotta get it. Let's see. So it's clear to me that I'm predominantly an intuitor, And you might think about what gives you energy. And I just talked about an idea. Entropy is just a rather abstract notion in physics. In fact, you really can't even understand it. I mean, it's weird. Measure of entropy is the Boltzmann constant times the natural logarithm of the complexity or number of states in a system. That's not something that most people get sprung into real quickly. So that sounds like fun, but that's the intuitor likes this idea, and I'm highly energized. I have a hard time tearing myself away from this, doing things, my chores of the day, because that's my. So that's my little solar panel up there giving me energy and cheering me up, because that's my primary function. The thing that's next easiest for me is the green. And again, I get energized from doing the workshops. I get energized from helping people. The orange requires energy. It consumes energy. I can do it, but it takes work. And the yellow is really hard to do. So for me, the life task when I'm working with people in organizations is doing this. This is what's hard. So for me, the story is pretty clean. Let's imagine that I'm with a person whose dominant function is the sensor. And the reason I picked that is it's 180 degrees out from me. And I'm going to pick a person that's primarily an emotional decider, so that they're going to be in the diagonal that's most difficult for me. So that person is going to get energy from relating with people. The sort of key to these people is they're sort of universally liked. Everybody I know that lives in this place, everybody likes them. I talked to sometime about a story. Some years ago, I went and bought a new car. Actually, it was a Leaf, and the reason I bought it was with all the rebates, it was a $35,000 car for $15,000 brand new. So I walk into the showroom, and I've got 6 friends immediately. Everybody in the showroom is become instantly a friend. And that's because they're all yellows, and that's why they're in sales and marketing. So for them, they get energy out of doing the orange. They don't mind writing up the invoice and all that. They need some energy to actually care about me and try and display that. And their biggest difficulty is concepts and creativity. They're much more into the human emotion. Let's imagine that person and I are sitting on a mountaintop, and we get a sunrise. So they're going to say to me, wow, what a beautiful sunrise. Aren't you enjoying it? My first instinct is going to be to explain how diffraction of light creates this. I'm going to go into the concept. And if I start that, I realize, because I know this work, I'm going to ruin it for them. So instead, I just say, yeah, that's really beautiful. So does that help? That's the basic idea here. So I think figuring out your primary deciding and your primary data. What I like about this notion is it's so simple. That's what drew me to it. In physics, even Einstein said everything's made as simple as possible and not more so. And so the idea of, as a system engineer in China pointed out to me, it's just input and output, information input, decision output. So that simple model lets you figure out your color and inform on jobs you do well, and when you're gonna feel appreciated. And I took it to the next level, thinking about the one of the 4 is dominant. That's not what you're talking about as a more sophisticated version of the whole idea to go into that next step. But that's useful to me. So
Yeah, and you were saying in Jungian, his original model, that's where the P and the J came from?
no, that's an invention of Myers-Briggs.
Okay.
Myers-Briggs decided to the big difference is that they're looking at, I looked at their work, and as I see it, they're measuring beliefs. And they're not innate. Beliefs are injected by society. If you have children, imagine that at the early age, you put a syringe in their head and telling them what's real and what's valuable.
Right.
You start
Right.
injecting beliefs. So if you're measuring beliefs, I think it's this confusion between nature and nurture. So I think what they're measuring is nurture. And what I'm trying to go back to what Jung said, we're born with an innate personality. And so the best way I thought to get a handle on that is by measuring processes. So basically the first one, the E and the I think is nonsensical because I don't think it correlates with anything useful. Contrary to popular opinion, I think the most effective business leaders are intuitors, are introverts. And I think it's very context sensitive. So for me at least, I use myself as an experimental model. I'm basically an introvert. I can only tolerate being with people so long, but I enjoy doing the workshops in that context. I'm very comfortable being an extrovert. I'm very comfortable presenting. I'm very comfortable articulating these facts like they're the truth, these storylines. So I think measuring the E and the I is a waste of time. And I think that again, it's even harmful because I don't think you can measure. I think it's very contextual. The next thing they do, the next two letters are picking up the same Jungian ideas as I have here. They're measuring, and then they go one step further and try and say, which is the stronger axis? And what I'm interested in is in their repetition of their tests. The first E and I doesn't change much because it's very subjective. The second letter changes maybe, I don't know, maybe 10% of the time. The third letter, 30% of the time. And the fourth letter, 50-50. And what I like about my work is when I do workshops, I have people, I give away these colored badges. And I've got people have 14 colored badges. And they say, it's exactly the same every time. It never changes. That tells me we're successfully looking at what's innate, which is the core of this thinking and Jung's thinking. And Myers-Briggs, it's useful to me because they've got some data on these parameters, but I
Right.
don't like it. I think it's too complicated. And I think the name yourself as one of 16 is just flat wrong.
Well, and that was kind of the story in the book, right? About
Yeah.
Skip, and he kind of misidentified himself. I think I'm very similar in that way. I think the other challenge I always had is I never knew what to do with it.
Yeah, that's right. So this I think is actionable. It's once I got this understanding. By the way, I'm going to tell you a story about the business school. It was a very strange place. And one of the stranger things was there was a guy there, I don't remember his name right now, but he was their guy for the foundation, which is a code word this university uses for raising funds. And people give money according to, I think, predominantly emotions. That's a decision you make. You have good feelings about your university, you give money to it. So he was the primary source of the money they needed to exist. And they treated him like crap. And they didn't respect him. They didn't want him in faculty meetings. It seemed very odd to me. Why if someone you're that dependent on for your livelihood, why do you treat him that way? And then I got it. It's a research university. They're all blues. He's a yellow. They rejected him without knowing why. So I took him out to lunch and explained this, and he thanked me. He said, finally, I get it, I understand. Because until then, I said, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just you're not them. And they're in a self-imposed high-stress environment. It's one of the strangest places I've ever been where people were miserable when they had every reason to be happy. But anyway, it's interesting that Larry Singel saved the place, and he was dean there for, I think, 5 years. After his death, they did nothing. The economics department, where he was a chair for a time, they had a big ceremony, and the head of the business school came because I think he thought he had to. So just so typical of them. And Larry was a yellow. So anyway.
Thank
Charlie,
you for
you're
that.
due for a break.
Time for a break. Darinka,
Yes.
wants you on your feet. Let's go. All right.
That's always so good. Thank you for reminding us, Drinka.
Oh, yeah, it's always,
So with Darinka, was that a useful side excursion for you?
yeah, it is, and it's, like for me being orange, first of all, it was, really good, when I first learned about it. So years ago, when I first exposed to that, it answered many questions. And then it's also, I mean, I don't know how much one can change, but at times it just helps me understand that
Yeah.
I can't, like, there is no way how I think about it. There is no way that others will, or a certain group of people will think about it. So there is no way I can actually transfer the message to them the way how I think about it. I have to
Yep.
really think, okay, well, what is the way that will relate to them? And I mean, I had a really interesting experience teaching non-accounting students, teaching them accounting. So it is a college program and they have to take it. None of them would have ever chosen to do it. And but then I'm like obstacle in their way. They cannot go further without passing. So it was just yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I remember some of them. I mean, I remember, for example, determining what are units of measure that work. So I found that if you talk in hundreds, people who do not understand math, they can relate the best. Tenths are too small and often get into decimal points, and thousands become too abstract. Millions don't even go there. But if you talk in hundreds, I found, for example, simple matter. If you probably talk to Charlie while you talk about like 0.003, or you talk about 3 billion, Charlie's mind can follow what you're talking about. But someone whose mind cannot comprehend math, no, can't take them there. There's no way message will ever make it. So it's just like a big thing is reading their faces and knowing, is the message getting there?
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting.
Any more comments or questions? If we go back to our syllabus?
None for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is just to remind you, we're going through the document that came out of the Berlin birthday party workshop. So about making this habitual, I think when you first start appreciating, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're not used to it. I think that others that are close to you and have not been no habit of feeling appreciated, they're not going to be comfortable. I have a little story back from an early workshop. I give an assignment in the workshops. There used to be 3 days. I think this would have been I forget for sure, but a first day action item, and to go and express authentic appreciation for someone you care about, and do it, really with something that would be important. So, and I get reports the next morning, and they're often interesting. I hear things like, it was so moving. My daughter said, I've never appreciated the sacrifices you made for me. One guy raised his hand and said, oh, this was a total disaster. And I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah. So, well, I decided to do it big. I was going to buy a bouquet of roses and knock on the front door of the house. And when my wife would open the door, I was going to hand her the flowers and tell her how much I loved her. I said, that sounds great. What happened here? He said, well, that went bad. I said, well, what did she do? So she said, you're not getting any tonight, Buster, and slammed the door in my face. So she was so unaccustomed to it that she assumed it was just pure manipulation. So stay with it. So I look for opportunities to do this. And some time back, I was flying on Air China. I'm always in business class, and it was a domestic flight, so it wasn't phenomenal, but the service was really, really good. And so I appreciated with gestures, smiles, and words, thank you, throughout the service. I noticed that one flight attendant had a red dress on, and being China, I assumed she was the purser. So I walked up to her and said, I just want you to know the service on this flight was excellent. This was service I would expect in international business class. This is a domestic flight. And she smiled broadly and said something that surprised me. She said, thank you, but we can do better. And I thought, that's a very Asian response. I don't think I would hear that commonly on United Airlines. And then she said, were you going to use the washroom? And I said, yes. She said, go back to your seat so I can clean it for you. So this is how this comes around, so people want to pay it back. And I was flying from Shenzhen to Beijing on Han Airlines, again in business class. And this was a very unusual thing. The purser came, it's like 40 people. It's a big jet. I think it was a plane that normally used for international flights, and there'd been some problems with flight control or something. So we got an international style airplane for a domestic flight. It had, I think, 40 business class seats. And the purser came up and introduced herself to me before the flight and nobody else. And this happens frequently in China, and I really don't know why. I don't, it's obvious I'm a foreigner, and somehow that gets their attention, and probably that I'm American, most likely. Anyway, so again, the flight was service. And as the flight was preparing to descend, they'd put on the chime, but they hadn't been rigorous about seating yet. I went up and said, I've got 1.5 million miles with United, so I know of what I speak. This flight was excellent. Again, meeting standards for international flights, even though it's a domestic flight. She became so excited, she became flustered. She unaccustomed to this. And she stammered, I need to give you something. And because they were putting everything away, there's nothing left but a banana. So she says, here, take this. Then she saw I was sitting with Sharon, and she felt bad about that and brought Sharon a banana. I did not want your friend to feel left out. So there were glad group and love group emotions everywhere. So I want to encourage you to play with this. Everything that I give you, I want you to think of yourself as an experiment and try it out. And I want to encourage you that you might get some really unexpected fun out of this. And what works is it authentic? Yeah, I'm in appreciation. And to be honest with you, if I was back in tourist and nothing exceptional happened, I might not be able to do anything. But business class, which is, if you fly as much as I do, it's not always great. Sometimes it is. And when it is, you make that extra effort. Comments or thoughts about experimenting with appreciation? Have you guys done this?
Not on this level, but I'm starting to make it more habitual and authentic. I think that's the harder part for me, just not being in the emotional.
Well, I think it's about stopping and asking, what am I grateful for? And I guess this was easy because I'm treated very well over there. I had somebody. I was doing a workshop one time and there was an American I met in the lobby or something. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I told him and said, "Do this workshop. You want to come stick your head in?" He said, "Sure, I'd like to do that." And I said, Personally, I like being here." So he stayed for a session, which was about an hour. And at the end, he walked up to me and said, "No wonder you like it here. They treat you like a rock star." So that helps. Okay. Darinka, are you experimenting with appreciation?
I find that it's really tremendously good for people, and I always I think about it, how good it's going, like how good is it going to make somebody's day.
Nice. Okay.
And you know what? I told you before I like going to concerts. So it's also the other day when I went to a concert, well, the concert ends with a long applause.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, okay, what does it feel when you finish every work day, if you're a musician, with that long applause? And then I'm thinking, what can I do for the people where I work so that they feel a long applause at the end of the day, every day?
That's great. One of the things that people talk about, I asked clients how they did this, and one guy had the idea of kudos bars on his desk, and he handed out kudos bars. I started this with the idea of the verbal appreciation, but over time, I got that the gesture is more important, and appreciating someone authentically and then handing them a kudos bar, I think kind of amps it up. So Darinka, why don't you put a box of kudos bars in your desk drawer and hand them out?
Thank you.
So this is the JW Marriott Hotel in Beijing. This is one of my favorite hotels in the world. Actually, the one in Vietnam's actually better, but for place I go all the time, and I'm here. Used to be probably for 3 weeks at a time, twice a year, so they know me. And when this is because I have the status, I get the executive lounge, and this is great. I mean, the executive lounge in the US is like, don't bother. And the executive lounge in Asia, they have like a breakfast buffet with 50 items, egg Benedict, what have you, afternoon tea with sandwiches, and then a dinner meal again with sushi to hot meals and unlimited wine and beer and regular alcohol. I don't drink it, but it's most pleasant to go up there in the evening and sort of sit there and sip wine all night, read a book, and eat this delicious food. So many years later, I noticed a guy that I was there, and I thought he might be the manager because he had on a suit. I mean, he looked dapper. He looked like he was the guy in charge. He wasn't a waiter. And I said, "Are you the manager?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "My name is Jackie, but I'm known as the Eagle." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because I'm watching everything." So I see punctuation errors looking at this thing. So I asked him, and he said to me, "Welcome to the lounge, Mr. Pellerin." Now, that sentence I see I left out, but, and I was astounded. And so I asked how many guests, no, actually, he asked me my room number. When I told him that, he said, welcome, Mr. Pellerin. And, worked by name. So I was astounded that he could do this. And asked how many guests coming to the lounge that night. He said 140. And I asked him how he memorized our name. He said, I just scanned the sheet earlier in the day. Can you imagine? So Jackie later, so I'm here again over and over. Jackie said, our general manager likes to meet interesting people. Would you be willing to meet with him? And I said, sure. And Rick Saul met me for a glass of wine many evenings. What he liked to do is he liked to drink, and his wife didn't like him drinking too much. So he'd come up with me, pretend he's in a business meeting, and he and I drink wine in the executive lounge. His wife and family lived in the lounge. It was combined with a Ritz-Carlton that he managed both. So he and I are still friends to this day. I'm in contact with him, and also the people in the lounge, the ladies, service ladies, got to know them, not as well, but they recognize me, and it's kind of nice. You walk in there, and as you sit down, and they bring you your favorite wine and food snack. They know what it is. So, and I have lifetime platinum status at the time. It's been changed from platinum to some other metal, titanium, which kind of annoys me because you make bicycles out of titanium. Platinum is a much more elegant metal, but anyway, I still have this VVIP treatment. So Richard, and so another thing that Richard did was whenever I came, I got a suite, and those are on the same floor as the executive lounge. And Junko would join me at some point during the trip. This may sound silly, but one of the best things about it was it had 2 bathrooms. So you can kind of go to the bathroom whenever you want and shower whenever you want, or take a bath whenever you want without worrying about the other person. We have the same thing in our house. And when I showed up, I'd automatically be comped. And the rooms even have a priority on the floor. The ones that are further down the end away from the elevator, as you go down the floor, they become more and more valuable because as you get down the hall closer to the elevator, there's more people walking by at night talking. So the premium room in the whole hotel was the one at the end of the hall, the suite with 2 bedrooms. So I could go work in a separate office from Junko if she's sleeping, 2 bathrooms, and always got that. And when I arrived, there's a bottle of wine and a basket of fruit, which Richard put there. So Richard left, and a new general manager came, and I checked into the hotel and found myself in just a plain ordinary room on a lower floor, and I'd never been on this side of the hotel, so I concluded this is the less desirable side, facing more traffic. So I asked the lounge ladies to arrange a meeting with the new general manager at the end of the day, as I was out all day. So Priscilla shows up with her manager of rooms, Hunter, and I think the lounge ladies had forewarned them that I look like I'm pissed off. So she came in, and she's a younger woman. Hunter too is younger. They're new in the job. I think maybe her first assignment as a general manager, and she's already got an unhappy customer here. So I sat down with her and began with appreciation. This is a 4D request, but it didn't have to be. The appreciation did it. So I said, I told her, I said, I think I've stayed at every Marriott in Beijing, and there's probably like 6, maybe 6 of them. And I just need you to know how special your hotel is to me. I love everything about it, the executive lounge, and mostly the ladies in it. The perfect housekeeping. The housekeepers got to know us. And when she came in, she doesn't speak a word of English. That they would do things like in the evening, this is how nice this hotel is. They put down a little mat by the bed for your feet and changed out the towels in like 6 at night and brought in a bucket of ice because they know we like it. Turned down service, all this stuff. So, and she came in with a big smile, and I said, most clients don't like to hear this, but if you didn't exist, I'd be much less willing to travel on this long trip. It's like maybe 30 hours traveling. It's a big deal. Then inclusion, over the years, I've enjoyed friendships with many of the staff and hope to have something similar with you. The unfortunate reality is, in my past visit, I've become accustomed to very special and heartwarming perks. A room, usually a suite on the executive floor. They know I like a yellow flower in my bathroom, that would be there. A welcome bottle of wine, and you can pick something. It's fancy, but what's in the executive lounge is fine. And they put an air purifier in there because they know I worry about the Beijing air. So could you please do as many of these things as you're willing and able to do? For my part, I will continue to assist my clients place events in Beijing and locations that allow me to stay here and continue 5-star reviews for you on TripAdvisor. So Beijing is so big with so much traffic that I can't stay in this hotel unless they put the events nearby. You might find this hard to believe, but you can't travel across Beijing in rush hour in less than a couple of hours. So from then on, back to all my status, and Hunter and I became particularly close, and he and I still email once in a while. So this is the power of appreciation. If I'd gone in there and said, this shithole, I don't like being treated like this, none of this would have happened. And and then the other thing is what happened next is that when we're checking out, the executive lounge would go there for breakfast, and they would ask me, what time are you leaving? And I might say, we're going to be leaving at half an hour, and if someone would give us a hand with our luggage, we'd appreciate it, and instead of calling the front desk and asking for someone to come up, one of the ladies, maybe in high heels, would take our wheelies down. When we got there, the whole office staff was out there to welcome us and clap as we left the hotel. How cool is this? So what do you think of that story?
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's to me, it's not only like, to me, sometimes what I found that it really turns the conversation is when you go somewhere where it's really busy, like you're buying coffee, and then when you ask the person, how are you?
Yep.
Most of the time they just stop, because there might have been 2 or 3 hours where people just say, I want this coffee, and then they yell at them because they didn't put exact amount of sugar in it. And it's like, whoa, something now. And I mean, the other thing is, when you say authentic, I don't know how to fake it. If I don't feel like asking someone, how are you? I'm not going to ask. I can't
That's
force
right.
myself to do it. So it's when I asked, it's sincere.
I say, how's your day going?
Yeah.
Or, I told you this story, I think, about Sharpie and flying to the US. I gotta tell this again. Ian Sharp like to do workshops with me in the US, and he does not make a lot of money, the typical Australian. And I could not charge the government for airfare from him from Australia. Somebody would say, we're not doing that. So I paid his airfare out of my own pocket. And then once he arrived in Los Angeles, his travel went on the bill to the client. So I don't make enough money on these workshops that I can pay a business class ticket from him from Australia. So he's going to fly animal class. So what he told me that he does is he goes into the airport lounge and at the gate, sits down where he can keep an eye on the person who's managing the check-in right at the gate. And he waits until it's kind of quiet, and he tries to watch them, and he goes up and says, my hat's off to you. That last person was just rude to you. That was unnecessary. You handled it like a professional. I really respect how you dealt with this. You're really good at this. I couldn't do it, frankly. And now they're smiling, okay? Once you get that smile going, what you've done is you've created a good mood they don't want to break. So now you make your request. Said, you know, I'm gonna be flying to the US to do workshops. And my sponsor there expects me to hit the ground running. That he gives me, you know, like I arrive at 10 o'clock at night and I get one night's sleep, and the next day I'm gonna be in a workshop, and I really need some rest. And is it possible that you got a row of empty seats in here that I could have? Because then I could just lie down and sleep. How often do you think he gets that? Every flight. So one of the what he would really like is a first class upgrade, but you don't ask people for something that they can't give you. And there was a time, maybe 20 years ago, I think you could, maybe longer, a gate agent could do that, but now it's all run on a computer. The gate agents have no capability to give free upgrades. It's all done, but I mean, if there's any empty seats, there's a queue of upgrade requests from frequent flyers and all that. But they can look on the airplane and find a place with empty seats and block them. They can do that. So, you know, and you got to go in here with your heart really appreciating what they're doing, or it doesn't work. But experiment with appreciation, and then tell me some future event what you think. Is this hard?
It's important.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
It's really important. We have to make it a priority, as it does really make a difference in somebody's day.
Here's the beauty of it. Once you make it a habit, it's effortless.
Yeah.
You won't notice it. You just do it. I mean, that's what you want to get to. You want to get to the state of habit, to where when you do these things, it's you don't even notice you're doing it. And that's kind of where I've evolved to. But don't forget, I've been in hundreds of workshops. So everyone that I give, I'm a participant. But I noticed myself changing quite a lot in the first half dozen, and then not so much. But this repetition that we're doing, I think, is really good. And I'm happy to keep doing this as long as you folks are having fun with it. I like doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time you go over that, and it's seemingly something that we have spoken about, I learn so much more from you. So I always really appreciate
Great,
that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the depth of the material continues to amaze. So I do think the repetition and the revisiting questions, all of it is extremely helpful.
Sure.
Thank you both.
Okay.
Thank you.